All right, nature photographers, I'm so excited to bring you today's video. I know many of you have been waiting for it. I get asked about it regularly. You know, when it comes to reviewing camera gear, I have a real struggle with folks that do a review after having a camera for a week, which is what is true for most of the well-known camera review sites. That's not a review. If you don't use something long enough to actually get really familiar with it, you might be able to do a first impression, which is what I did with the OM1 Mark II a while back. But you know, driving a car, sometimes you buy a car and you love it when you first sit in it and drive it, and then you drive it a little longer, and then you go, I'm not so sure I like this feature, or, oh man, I did not realize how much I was going to appreciate what this offers. So today is going to be my 6-month OM1 Mark II actual review. I know you've been looking for it. I've been looking forward to sharing it with you, and I'm going to share you the goods, the bads, the uglies, all those kind of elements. So stay tuned. Let's get rolling. Howdy from West Texas. I'm Lee Hoy, professional nature photographer, and this is my YouTube channel, Lee Hoy Photography. I'm an OM System Ambassador, photography workshop instructor for Wildside Nature Tours of Precision Camera and Video, and contributing author for the Journal of Wildlife Photography. All right, photographers. So let me give you some idea of how much I've used OM1 Mark II bodies. I first acquired the cameras right before I left for my Peruvian Amazon riverboat adventure. So I've shot it, you know, there. I shot it while on a skiff going up and down Amazon tributaries. I shot it while hiking in a tropical forest. And I shot it on a South American beach and from a very rough wooden boat going around a small rocky island on about a 2-hour excursion. So I had mainly bird and flight, macro, and some mammal photography. So that's what that encompassed. There's not really landscape photography on that workshop. Then I came back. I did my Florida OM system only workshop where we go to some lakes. We're shooting from a pontoon boat where we're shooting, you know, nesting osprey, nesting snail kites, flying water birds. So that workshop entailed bird and flight. Don't think I did no macro, no landscape, pretty much strictly bird and flight, because that's the topic, you know, mastering bird and flight photography. So that was in Florida, and that was back in March. Then in April, I went to Cuba for the first time on a workshop. Well, that involved bird and flight, and street photography. I'm trying to think if I really did any landscape, maybe a handful, not much, okay? Then directly from Cuba to Patagonia, where I covered Patagonia from El Calafate in the north, driving all the way down to Ushuaia, so covering both Argentina and Chile. That was mammals, bird and flight, much more landscape, and, you know, shooting from while hiking, shooting on shoreline, shooting from boat trip, shooting from a ferry, and yeah, shooting from beaches. So that you know, and in rain, in good cold. I've shot in very humid already. So then I went to Ohio for the biggest week in birding. I didn't do a whole lot of shooting. That was mostly bird photography from a boardwalk. I'm so busy there working the booth and other things that I don't have a lot of time for photography. And I'm also not a huge fan of, you know, 1,000 or 2,000 people on a boardwalk. Not my groove. Then went off to the Galapagos Islands, where it is heavy on bird and flight, reptiles, and some mammals, sea mammals, shooting from a yacht, shooting from pangas, shooting from a beach. That's landscape. I do some landscape there. And then I had a little bit of landscape between some of the trips here at home. And that pretty much, I haven't been home a lot. So it's been, you know, fairly limited on what I got to shoot around here. So as you can see, I've covered a diversity of things. Oh, in the Amazon, I had some macro. And so not nearly as much macro. I'm jonesing for a lot more macro. We haven't had our summer monsoon rains here in West Texas. So that means I don't, you know, it's okay, but it's not great yet for macro. It will be shortly. But to give you an idea, I've shot somewhere between, I know at least 350 to 425,000 images on the two bodies, because I have some 170,000 in my Lightroom catalog so far, and I know I cull a ton, right? Most of those I cull are still well exposed, nice, sharp, good shots. I'm just keeping the best of the best of the best, and I really probably need to whittle it down even more. But that gives you an idea. I have seriously put these cameras through the test. No real night sky opportunities. I had one where I had the moon bow out here at home, but not a lot of night sky yet. That's coming up, hopefully, if I have enough time here at home to go out and do some night sky stuff. I think, in fact, tonight might be a new moon, so I might get out here in the next few days. To give you what I shoot, I have one OM1 Mark II with no battery grip with an Atoll D, and this has programmed C1, custom mode 1 is for landscape. C2 is wildlife environmental shots. C3 is macro, and C4 is night sky. So this body is used for those genres and those purposes, okay? That's what I use this body. I don't want a grip because I want to keep it even lighter so I can do one-handed macro. I don't really need a grip for landscape. Often if I'm shooting vertical, I'm on a tripod and I can hand hold for that kind of thing. It's not that big a deal. So I don't normally need two batteries. I'm not shooting crazy shots. Maybe if I were doing a really long live composite for Star Trail, I might, but I have not found that to be a problem. I still put two memory cards in it in case I do interval shooting or something like that. Then my other OM1 Mark II is always gripped, always two batteries, bigger memory cards, generally a 256 in slot 1 and a 128 in slot 2, because I'm shooting, remember, at SH2 a lot, 50 frames per second. It normally always has the 150 to 400. If I'm on Safari, this one will probably get this lens and maybe the 40 to 150 or the 12 to 100 on the other body. It's rare that this lens is not on this body, okay? Might be on a rare occasion, but this is normally what I'm carrying in this configuration. So as you can see, the lenses I've shot with this year using an OM1 Mark II, 7 to 14, 8 to 25, 12 to 100, 40 to 150, 150 to 400. And I haven't used my 12 2.0. I haven't used the 8 fisheye yet. Oh, I used the 90 macro. Yep. Haven't used the 60 macro yet. Haven't used the 30 macro. And I think that probably covers the lenses that I have shot with it so far. Why do I share this? Why is this important? I don't think most people share this information so that you know what features I've primarily been using, so that you'll understand, what exposure, I shoot in manual all the time. So the more information I give you about what I've been doing with it, the more you'll understand my review. For example, I tell you my philosophy is I want speed and accuracy. I'm talking about autofocus, drive mode. For wildlife, that's what I'm all about, speed and accuracy. I want to be able to acquire focus quickly. I want to be able to capture a lot of shots and pick my favorite from a sequence, whether it be action, bird and flight, perch bird. I'm looking for the best head angle, the best body position, yada, yada, yada. Then for landscape, I'm all about making sure focus is exactly where I want it to be. Great composition, which of course great composition is important in wildlife too, and I try to compose in camera. But landscape, I'm slowing down, so I'm not as worried about speed, because unless I'm working with lightning or a very fast moving storm, there are occasions where in landscape you may need to move quick. But for the most part, we have time to slow down. So most time I'm shooting from a tripod, and most of the time I shoot both horizontal and vertical on both cameras. Another reason I want the grip on the OM1 Mark II is shooting vertically is so much easier. Most people don't shoot vertically. If you haven't watched my video, A Vertical Subject Warrants a Vertical Composition, you should watch that video. So my philosophy for landscape, night sky, and macro is slow, steady, work the subject. Wildlife is speed, accuracy, work the subject, okay? So that's what's driving me when I am working with these two cameras. So enough of the background, let's talk about my actual review. So I've told you I'm a bluntly honest guy. And initially in the Peruvian Amazon, trying to photograph moving birds, flying birds from a skiff, I was frustrated. And I was struggling with some of the autofocus issues. Now remember, I shoot at 50 frames per second. I push bodies to their max. Most photographers aren't pushing it necessarily quite as far as I do. I bet some of you probably are now. And I will be very interested in hearing comments if you've experienced some of the things that I'm going to share throughout this video. Let me say overall, at this point, I am very happy with my OM1 Mark IIs. I have not shot with an OM1 since. Even though I got frustrated early on, I was initially like, oh, let me grab my OM1. I'm missing some shots. I did not want to do that. So I found that it was struggling initially to get some autofocus that I knew my OM1 would be getting. I could tell autofocus was working faster, no doubt about it, but I wasn't sure it was more accurate. At times, it felt like the autofocus was trying too fast. And I know that sounds funny, but that's what I could tell by looking through the viewfinder. It felt like it couldn't settle, like it was just, there's, like I'm working, I'm going fast. Yeah, I want you to go as fast as possible, but I also want you to be as accurate as possible. So I was very frustrated for a while in the Amazon. My co-leader will tell you, I was getting some phenomenal shots. Don't get me wrong. I was getting some great shots. So I am, you know what I'm comparing the OM1 Mark II? I am only comparing it to the OM1. I'm not comparing it to any other camera body. This was one of my all-time favorite bodies. So I am comparing it to that because it is obviously the successor to that. That's the only comparison I need to make, okay? And that's the only comparison I'm talking about in this review, not any other camera. Now, as I started post-processing, I couldn't do much in the Peruvian Amazon because Lightroom was not yet updated for the OM1 Mark II. We didn't have internet really, so I can't update the software. So I did no post-processing in the Amazon, which was brutal. I only culled. So at least I could cull images with Photo Mechanic, but I could not edit. So I then went to Florida on my OM system only, mastering birds in flight. And I was in communication with OM system, and they were giving me some feedback about some of the settings that they felt that they had experienced that, hey, this might need to be changed. And they said they were not hearing this from most other ambassadors, most other photographers. But I don't think most people push a camera to the limits like I do. For example, if you give someone a Ferrari and they never get it out of second or third gear, then they can't really give you a great review on a Ferrari. They can give you a good review on a Ferrari driving it in second and third gear. But if you say, well, I don't know how many Ferraris a gear has, I will never own one. It wouldn't even be able to get up here to my house in the Davis Mountains. And I will never have that much money for a car. And I think if I did, I'd probably spend it on traveling and photography. Let's be honest. I don't know how many people pushed it at SH2 at 50 frames per second, shooting, moving swallows from a moving boat, okay? So I am comparing this camera at being pushed to the maximum ability of any camera system. Most clients don't even try to photograph some of the things I try to photograph. They just say it's too hard, but I love those challenges, okay? They're not even my most liked images, but for me, I know what it took to get them. It's just how I'm wired. That's what I enjoy. Well, I just felt like there were times where I had plenty of contrast, and I'm going to share some images with you, that it wouldn't acquire focus at all, no matter using bump autofocus techniques. And guys, I'll be honest, I'm probably as fast at acquiring a subject in camera as anybody you know, and I'm really good at acquiring focus. I mean, I'm hyper fast on that, and it's just it's just how I'm wired. It's because of a combination of hunting, playing video games, having great hand-eye coordination. I wrestled, I played football, I played baseball, I ran track. So I have some advantages that other people might not have. I suck at most things in life, guys. Believe me, I'm not a braggart. I suck. If I ever sing a song, you will cry in tears, not of joy, but of sorrow. I know what I'm good at. That's one of the things I'm really good at. And I was very frustrated initially, okay? So they told me, well, turn off CAF plus MF. Whoa. That's a problem for me. I use CAF plus MF a lot, that's not something I don't want to have to be able, I shouldn't have to be able to do that. I didn't have to do that on the OM1. And there were other recommendations on some settings and try this, try that. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to be honest. If I'm struggling, how would the everyday person handle some of these situations? Now, ironically enough, I have not heard a single complaint from a photographer about the OM1 Mark II. Everybody is ecstatic. But again, are they pushing it in 10th gear in the Ferrari, right? Are they hammering it out? Are they redlining it? I don't know. Probably not like I do. Probably not. But, so that was my initial frustration, which I'm happy to say I am mostly over it at this point. I'll talk more about it in a minute. Let me talk about some of the things that right away blew me away. You know, there is definitely a bit more dynamic range in the OM1 Mark II than the OM1. I feel like I have more flexibility on brightening shadows. You can just tell there's a bit more play in your raw file. Now, again, I teach and I encourage you to shoot exposing to the right, capturing as much data as possible, right? And that's still very important, but yes, we have a bit more leeway with the OM1 Mark II than the OM1. No doubt about it. I feel much more confident saying that. I feel like at any boy, that's hard for you to say, isn't it, Lee? Yes, it is. I feel like at any ISO, you can crop your images some. I'm going to do a video for y'all coming up on cropping a high ISO image. I think that's going to be key. I feel there's more flexibility, and that caveat is using DxO Pure Raw or, you know, Topaz AI, whichever software you prefer. I like DxO Pure Raw 4. And that's exposing to the right, starting with a sharp shot, not cropping the crap out of it, but I'm going to do a video for you on that. The graduated neutral density filter is the absolute bomb. I was out doing a video, which I haven't released because I realized I didn't do it the way I wanted to, and I was out for over almost 20 hours doing that. It pissed me off that I did a poor job planning on that one. It's going to be about the circadian rhythm of natural light. I was out early one morning in a state park that's about 5 miles as the crow flies from me, but it's a 50-mile drive to get over there. So I get over there at like 5 in the morning, right? And I'm set up all my video cameras, and I'm talking and recording the video. And so much work for y'all not to have even seen that video. And guess what? I look to my right, and there's a moon bow, almost full moon bow off to my right. I turn my camera around, and there's a CCC, you know, Civilian Conservation Corps for you young folks out there, built structure, beautiful stone structure, overlook. In the foreground, there's some yuccas. It's kind of an iconic location at a state park out here. So I'm framing it up. You know, I stop recording, and I try recording using the graduated neutral density filter. And mind you, yes, I had read the manual about graduated neutral density filter, but I had not actually used it. so I'm running and gunning, you know, I'm getting framed up because the clouds are moving. It's beautiful. And I'm thinking, so I'm trying to preserve as much light as possible, you know, the sky, but the foreground's, even though there's a pretty bright moon, the foreground's still kind of dark. And I thought, and I didn't take any filters with me because I was doing video. I wasn't going to worry about it. And all of a sudden I went, you idiot, you have a graduated neutral density filter. I went, oh. So I go in there and I turn it on. I figure out I can angle it. I pull it down. Oh, I look at the next image and I'm like, thank you, Lord. I mean, it was exactly what I needed. And trying to use a graduated neutral density filter separately at night in that setting would have been a royal pain in the butt. No doubt about it. So for landscape photographers, if you have the money and you ask me, should you upgrade from the OM1 to the OM1 Mark II? Oh, that's a hella yeah. The graduated neutral density filter, I was shooting a waterfall in Patagonia, and I wanted to frame it up a certain way, and it was shaded by a cliff, but a tiny little divot in the cliff allowed a sunbeam to come in, so it's sitting on this one rock. My composition, I couldn't come in tighter or it wouldn't look good. I had this one bright spot, and I thought, I turned on the live graduated neutral density filter. I moved it up to the very corner where all it did was hold back that rock. Bam. It would have looked ugly. That bright spot, your eye would have gone to it if I did not use a graduated neutral density filter. Held it back, bingo. And I'm standing in a stream, in Patagonia, cold water. I wouldn't want to be dealing with drop-in filters in a situation like that. I did find someone's credit card in the stream, and then 2 days later I found a wallet. My local guide in Patagonia, Esteban, thought I was like a miracle worker. So, what I really liked was how easy it is to use. You turn it on, you go into a setting, and I'll talk about this more, and then you have a couple of different screens. You have a screen where you can adjust it, and if you use the rear dial, you adjust it minor. Front dial, you'll adjust it more. You can angle it, you can move your center point. It is fantastic. Brilliant work, OM system. Absolute marvel of an addition to our camera system. Now, when it comes to the autofocus, which is what a lot of people are interested in, and really what the added RAM and processing power is, that should be one of the big things. Perch birds, I do feel like it's a little more accurate than the OM1. How could it be more accurate on perch birds but not necessarily on flying birds? I can't riddle that one for you, Batman. I can't. What I will say is this AI subject detection for perch birds is definitely better than the OM1. Is it more accurate overall? For mammals, I've started restricting mammals to dogs and cats because that is what it is programmed for, is dogs and cats. And there, I find it works really well. I find that bird tracking works better on reptiles and insects and most mammals. Bison, if you use the dog-cat setting on bison, it's not going to work very well. So the mammal detection needs a lot more AI programming because if you think about it, the shape of mammals' bodies has much more variation than bird bodies, plain and simple. Much more variation. The AI subject detection on insects with multifaceted eyes, that can throw it a little bit. It's still generally pretty accurate like on dragonflies, but I program my exposure compensation button because I don't use it because I hate everything about exposure compensation and aperture priority and everything they choose to be. So I program that to turn subject detection on and off. So very quickly I can disable subject detection if in that current situation it's not working as well. So I have shot a ton of shots. I did not go back to the OM1 at any time. I'm going to keep them because they're great bodies and if I want to do camera trapping or I might want to leave a camera body overnight for star trails, maybe I'll go with that. But I'd probably still go with my OM1 Mark II because I generally just want my better body out there. So there are the two main issues that I've had with the body, the only two complaints, other than firmware updating, which I railed about in my YouTube live video that we did yesterday. Yesterday was my first YouTube live, and I had an absolute blast. Great questions, great participants. I hope y'all will join me in the future. Look forward to future YouTube lives where it's myself and other OM system ambassadors. Well, Bird and Flight is better, much better after the last firmware update. I don't know exactly what all they did, but I do find that I did turn CAF plus MF back on. Some of the noise reductions, they told me to turn it off standard to turn it off. I was like, okay, why is that? I didn't have it turned off in the OM1 and I never had any issues. With the OM1, I always had complete confidence that I was probably going to acquire focus. With the OM1 Mark II, for quite a while, I didn't have that confidence. And I'm not sure I can say for Birds in Flight, I'm quite at the same level of confidence, but I suspect most of you may never experience that because you may or may not be trying to do some of the same things I'm trying to do. Again, if you've had some experiences, if you owned an OM1 and you now have an OM1 Mark II, I would love to know if you've experienced some of the same things. Another issue that can be a little awkward at times when I'm maxing it out, 50 frames per second, and I'm hammering the shutter button and I take a series of images, right? And then I let go of the shutter button, I'm done taking images, and I drop the camera. This happens. Let's hop over into Lightroom and take a look. All right, photographers, let's look over in Lightroom, and I'm going to share with you some of the issues and some of the amazing photographs that I've been able to capture with the OM1 Mark II as it relates to the bird in flight issue specifically. So I've saved several things here into a quick collection so we can look at them easily. So let me go over issue number one. One of the main issues that I've been having here, and let me eliminate the sidebar so we'll have more room and less distraction. I'll be taking a series of images, 50 frames per second, and I've noticed that on occasion, as I push the shutter button down and really hammer on it, I'll start taking a series of images, but then when I let go, it continues to take pictures as I drop the camera. Now, I know some people might say, Lee, are you sure you're still pressing the button? I am not still pressing the button. I've taken over 1 million images in my lifetime, easily 300,000 to 400,000 just this year. And yes, I know when I'm not pressing the shutter button. I haven't had this with any other camera I've ever owned. But let's take a look at this sequence. So here's a young kelp gull flying by. I never did get it in a good position in frame. It was flying against the mountains. I was hoping to have a nice shot of it against the mountains. But watch what happens. I quickly realize it's, the head angle that it's flying away from me. So I quit immediately. But as I drop the camera, see how it continues to take pictures? So what I'm concerned about is there some kind of lag is there a delay? Am I missing shots on the front end? Or is this an issue of that it's, because it's obviously taking pictures as I drop the camera without me pressing the shutter button. So there's some kind of a lag going on. It does not happen all the time. Since the recent firmware update, it's happening less and less. But I'm curious. I don't mind deleting the extra images. What I'm worried about is, am I missing images on the front end, or is it just taking excess images, right? Am I holding it down long enough that where it has enough pictures in the buffer that I don't realize it, or enough actuations? Let's say it like this, enough shutter actuations that as I drop the camera, it's still taking pictures, right? I don't know. I don't know what causes it. It's not a huge problem for me, but what I'm worried about is, am I missing something on the front end? Okay, so, there's an example. I've got another example here. I'm trying to follow this shearwater along, and as you can see, I lost focus, so I dropped the camera, and same situation. It's taking pictures while I'm dropping the camera without pressing the shutter button. So another issue that I have had on occasion is this. Here is a kelp goose. So let's take a look at this. Obviously, a tremendous amount of contrast, a white bird against a dark background. I'm laying on the front of a boat with a little bit of rocking movement, but I held the goose in frame quite well. But look at this series of images. So after this image, it loses focus. You see right here, it starts, watch this, it starts to acquire focus again, but then doesn't. But look at that, and that's bump. I'm not just hammering on the autofocus, I'm bumping it, and it never did reacquire focus on that till the point I dropped the camera. So that can be a little frustrating, right? But let me contrast that with this. So here's an image from the Galapagos Islands of a Galapagos shearwater. Look at how little contrast there is, and it nailed autofocus on that. I mean, that's mind-boggling. That is a tough autofocus acquisition scenario. I don't know if you've ever tried to photograph a shearwater, but they're very fast flyers, and that is not much contrast. Here's another example. I mean, very little contrast, nailed the focus right on those eye arcs on a brown noddy there in the Galapagos Islands. I mean, look at that. Nailed that autofocus. Same thing there with a fairly flat bird, right? So that's what's weird. It performs utterly spectacularly most of the time. But then sometimes, so here I'm trying to acquire, I don't know if this is a Magellanic or Imperial Cormorant, but it's got a pale sky. I'm hoping to get it in front of mountains. These images would have never been keepers anyways, but look at this. Plenty of contrast. Plenty of contrast, but it never did acquire focus. It starts to get closer, and then right when the bird exits the frame, certainly it acquires focus. So that's not that often, but it's often enough to make me go, right? So look at this, a big, giant black-browed albatross. Plenty of contrast, never does acquire it. That was frustrating. And obviously the bird got too far forward in the frame there near the end. So those are a couple of examples in Lightroom of some of the minor but annoying issues I've had. And again, it could be that I'm having too high expectations, but honestly, this is where I'm trying to compare to my mind to my OM1. Maybe I'm just not remembering some of the troubles or issues at times I had acquiring folks with the OM1, but I just don't remember it being quite like this. I'm still capturing ridiculous numbers of outstanding images. That's not the issue. But I am comparing this against perfection, as I've said before, which obviously there is no such thing. So I want to give you an honest and thorough 6-month review with the camera. For landscape photography, I'm beyond ecstatic. Couldn't be happier. Macro, very happy. Perch birds, birds on the ground. For mammals, I'm very happy. I'm getting outstanding images. Night sky, I've only got to do a tiny little bit, and mainly of a moonbow, not true Milky Way stuff yet. It's just now getting to be that season here in West Texas. But, again, I have very high expectations for everything in life, which can make some things very challenging. So, I just want to share an honest and thorough review of 6 months out in the field using this thing. I have not gone back to an OM1, and I don't expect I will. I like the advantages that I'm seeing here with the OM1 Mark II. If you own the OM1, is it an absolute necessity to upgrade? Not necessarily. If you're a landscape photographer, I won't lie, that graduated neutral density filter, that alone is probably worth an upgrade. The increased dynamic range and the little bit more flexibility in your final raw file, I certainly am very happy with that. If all you shoot is birds and you're very happy with your OM1, no, you don't necessarily have to upgrade to this body. You can certainly wait for the next one to come out. That would be an honest review. But, for the perch birds, I do find it to be more accurate and nails them right away. I don't seem to encounter this problem. And, almost all of these examples I've shown you are with the OM1 Mark II, the 150 to 400, maxed out at 50 frames per second, hammering away. And, that gives you the information you're looking for. I'd love for you to share in the comments below if you've experienced any similar situations. And if you tend to shoot maxed out or what your shooting style might be sure and add that so I'll know. I do want to share a couple of things with you. I don't know if you're familiar with my OM system only workshops. I'll be doing a video at that at some point here in the near future. Those workshops are designed to take it deeper in your OM system cameras. A lot of other professional photographers, they don't really have much knowledge at all of the OM system brand, whereas I have a pretty good knowledge of Canon, shot it for 25 years. Nikon, Sony, I've held most of them. I can work through the menus. But many photographers just poo-poo OM systems. So why not go on a workshop with a photographer that not only knows it, not only is an ambassador, but knows it inside and out? Because on those workshops, I can take you deeper into the menu, the settings, customizations, programming. They're going to help you with the specific genre that we're dealing with during that workshop. So Florida, my mastering birds in flight, Yellowstone in winter, mammals, some birds, and landscape. My Grand Teton in Yellowstone in 2025, the 2024 is filled up. We do that in fall. That's going to be landscape, maybe macro, wildlife, birds, night sky. You're really going to get a much more in-depth experience. If you want the most in-depth, you might consider my OM System Mentorship Program. I'm going to be starting that up probably in the next 3-4 months. I'm looking at trying to develop a schedule, update the handouts and videos. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email, give me a comment with your information. I can put that in my interested database so that you'll get the first email out when I make it go live for registration. Those are things that can give you a chance to really master your system and master your photography. I really appreciate you joining me here today. Hop over to the Wildside Nature Tours webpage. Go under our tours, look at the OM System Only workshop. That's where you can learn more about those. Meanwhile, whether you have an OM1, OM1 Mark II, EM1X, Mark III, Mark II, whatever you got, get out in the field, go capture some great images. Thanks for being a part of my online community. I'll see you next week.